You're listening to Sports Connections with David Smale, the show that brings you a fun and intimate look into connections throughout sports. Now here's your host, David Smale.
Ann Meyers-Drysdale's life is a series of firsts. She was the first player to be named to the United States national basketball team while still in high school. She was the first woman to be signed to a 4-year athletic scholarship at UCLA. She was the first 4-time All-American selection in women's college basketball history. In a game against Stephen F. Austin during her senior year, she recorded the first quadruple double in NCAA Division I basketball history, men or women, when she had 20 points, 14 rebounds, 10 assists, and 10 steals. Following her career at UCLA, she was the first woman to sign a contract with an NBA team in 1979. She was signed by the Indiana Pacers, though I really think she should have held out for a contract with the Trailblazers. She lettered in 7 sports in high school, including softball, badminton, field hockey, tennis, and basketball. She earned 13 different Most Valuable Player awards in high school, where she led her basketball teams to an 80-5 record. She was one of the first females enshrined into the Naismith Memorial Baseball Hall of Fame in 1993. She was part of the first class of the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame in 1999, and she was inducted into the FIBA Hall of Fame in 2007. None other than legendary college basketball coach John Wooden said of her, she was the one who really got women's basketball going. And if her last name sounds familiar, she's also the widow of Baseball Hall of Fame pitcher Don Drysdale. And I have to say, she's also one of my favorite all-time people. Annie, welcome to Sports Connections.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for having me on.
And first of all, happy birthday. Today, March 26th, is your birthday.
Yeah, great day. Great day for my mom and dad. I was the 6th child born, and there will be 5 more that follow me. Okay,
all right. Now, getting into your career, we talked about all the firsts. When you were establishing all those firsts, did you see yourself as a trailblazer, or were you just playing ball?
Just playing ball. Coming from a family of 11 children, and my sister Patty was the oldest of all of us, and she was probably the best athlete in the family.
Really?
She was 8 years older than I was, and certainly was trailblazing women's sports long before I was, as many of those women were when I got an opportunity to see her compete, whether it was softball, volleyball, basketball, so competitive. And to see these women that did not play in the limelight, they are the ones that opened up the doors.
Sure. Now, I knew one of your siblings, your brother David, who was next in line, right? After you?
It was Patty, Tom, Mark, Kathy, David, me, Jeff, Susie, Kelly, Colleen, and Bobby.
That's pretty good. Do you have to memorize that, or does it just come naturally to you?
Natural. It's
so
natural.
David's before you then? Correct.
Okay.
I actually talked to one of his former real good friends, Andy Lopez, who played baseball at UCLA when David was playing basketball there, and he asked it to be remembered to you as well. So when was basketball your favorite sport of all the sports you played?
Well, growing up in the 50s and 60s and a little bit of the 70s, it was, again, girls' sports were not that popular. I think my sister and all those women kind of made it popular because we got to see them compete. We'd always go to our brothers' games, whether it was basketball or Little League or football games and so forth. And I think what was so great is that the family always supported each other.
Yeah.
As much as I achieved or David achieved, all our siblings achieved just as much. So when you came home from a game or a race, some kind of competition, and you did well, there were about 3 or 4 others that did well too. So it was great not to be able to, I think none of us really got a big head because there was always somebody else doing something else. And our parents were very hard workers, and I think that they instilled that in us. My dad played basketball at Marquette. He was the captain of the 1945 team. They met at Marquette. As soon as they got married, they moved out to San Diego area. And so the first 6 of us were born in San Diego. And then my dad got a job in Chicago and worked for Sears. And so we moved back out to Chicago for about 8-9 years. 3 more were born there in Chicago. And then we moved out to Southern California in the Orange County area, and 2 more born there. So, the competition within the family and having sports was a great outlet for my mom, certainly to have us outside so we were competing, whether it was kick the can or Monopoly or card game or basketball, whatever, running races, we were always competing against each other. So I got to see my brothers and my sisters compete, and you just kind of went how they went.
I would guess that competition with your siblings, and those of us who have siblings know that you're not going to fight any harder than when you're competing against a brother or a sister. I imagine that drove a lot of your competitiveness that allowed you to be as successful as you were in athletics, didn't it?
Absolutely. And I think also that our parents were very supportive of their daughters competing in sports as much as they were their sons. So that was a big plus for us. But, once I got into, quote, the school system and didn't understand why we couldn't play sports, or a teacher would come up and say, if I was at recess playing football, let's say, or basketball, and a teacher came up and said, well, that's not ladylike. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
I was just doing something that our family did, and I saw that my sisters did it too. So it was kind of a dichotomy in as far as what people were saying socially outside the house. And but certainly we still had a great support system at home.
And was it your best sport? Was it your favorite sport? Or was basketball just where the opportunity to play at the next level came from?
Certainly we were exposed to basketball at an early age because of our dad.
Right.
But he played sports, not just basketball. And he exposed us to that. So in the early days, in the 60s and so forth, the AAUs are not like what AAU is today.
Right.
And actually for women, it was for older women to continue playing sports. But for young kids, the only two that I remember that were organized sports for girls were track and field or swimming. And so I loved Wilma Rudolph. And in fourth grade, I read a book on Babe Didrikson Zaharias, who was not only basketball and softball and all these other sports, and obviously an original member of the LPGA, but was an Olympian in 1932. And reading that book in fourth grade gave me a dream. And it gave me a dream to be an Olympian and represent this country as a track athlete, because that was a sport that was an organized sport that you could go to and compete in. And so that was the first sport. But then, as you said, in high school, I played 7 different sports. I mean, I played softball and certainly tennis and badminton and field hockey and the volleyball. And I loved volleyball and I loved track and field. And I still had that dream to go to the Olympics. In elementary school, in 5th and 6th grade, there was a boys after-school sports program for basketball, and it was only for boys. So my parents had to get an okay through the school and the school district to see that it was okay that I played with the boys. And I did get that opportunity because my parents fought for me.
I would bet, and I just have one brother, but I know that my biggest competition was in the backyard or the side yard. I'll bet your best competitions were against your siblings, weren't they?
Well, it really was, especially I was in between 2 boys, David and Jeff, and certainly I was too young to compete with Patty at that time. When I was 13, I did end up joining her AAU basketball team.
Wow.
But yes, the competition was intense, especially when I go down to the playground and play with my brother and their friends. And I would come home crying sometimes in the early days. And they said, well, if you're going to cry to mom and dad, you're not going to get to play. And so that really toughened me up quite a bit. And I knew if I wanted to play and compete, whether it was over the line or playing football or 500 or, some kind of competition basketball wise, I had to toughen up. And if in order to be a part of it, I had to be there and keep my mouth closed and just play hard and learn.
Do you have any favorite memories of the side yard games or the neighborhood games where you finally, maybe it was one where you finally beat your brother at a game, or just a game where maybe you and your siblings beat the rest of the neighborhood? Any favorite memories stick out for you?
I don't know if I ever beat David. I was when I was down at the playgrounds, I tried to be on his team.
Yeah.
And didn't always happen. People asked if we played one-on-one. Well, we did, only in the sense of trying to better ourselves.
Yeah.
Because beating David was not easy. He was just as intense and competitive as my sister Patty, as my brother Mark, as my brother Tom, my sister Kathy. And so, and we got that from our mom and dad. But certainly I think, we always went to the playground. We didn't have a basket at our court. If we tennis, you hit the ball up against the garage, or you go down to the school, you ride your bike down to the school. And we played 500 or football in the street right in front of the house. So, those days were really, I think really helped me grow to where I was and getting ready for the next level.
It's kind of an aside, but I think the next generation of athletes will be diminished or cheated a little bit, because when you and I were growing up, that's all we did. The summertime when we weren't in school, we'd eat breakfast, and our mom would say, lunch will be around noon, and we'd go out and we'd play whatever we could find. And kids now are playing video games or watching TV and stuff. I don't think that competitiveness that came from the neighborhood, it doesn't start until they get into organized sports and one failure and they lose that competitive. Do you agree with that?
The thing that the kids have today, and you take away the video games, which a lot of kids do, but the ones that are intense and playing sports, they do grow up in the club, the AAU level.
Yeah.
And so they're playing games all the time. They're gone every weekend. And we didn't have that. I mean, we spent our holidays with our families, and there might have been times with Thanksgiving tournaments or something like that, but they were all local. You've got a lot of these kids that are on AAU teams, and they're traveling to Chicago or Dallas or Los Angeles or back to New York and all these different AAU games. And sometimes the games, to me, there's so many that you wonder if they ever learn the skill or the sense of what it means to lose. Because when you're playing pickup ball and you lose, and you got next, and you got to wait in line for the next 3 or 4 games. Yeah, you want to be on a team that wins because you don't want to sit out. And but AAU, they have game after game after game.
Yeah, win or lose. That's a great point. When you signed with the Pacers in 1979, did you believe that you had a shot to make the team?
Why wouldn't I? I would have never. If I didn't believe in myself, I never would have attempted it. Certainly. There were so many factors that happened before that. Somebody gave me an opportunity. And at that point in my life, it was an opportunity that I felt that I couldn't turn down. In high school, between my junior and senior year in high school, I was playing on the boys' summer league team. And I had planned on playing on the boys' basketball team during the school year. But when you're in high school, you have you're changing emotionally and physically.
Right.
A lot of people said things about me. And it was very hurtful. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to play on the boys' team. But it opened up the door to be on the USA basketball team. And so I always believe that one door closes, another one opens. And then in high school, so being on the USA team, and as a matter of fact, Billy Moore, who would be my Olympic coach in 1976, coached at Cal State Fullerton. And she coached my sister Patty at Cal State Fullerton to their first national championship. And that was in 1970. And so I knew Billy from when I was in elementary school because of my sister Patty. But in high school, when I didn't play on the boys' basketball team, certainly I was playing all these other sports on the girls' side. And then going to USA basketball. My brother David, who was going to be a senior at UCLA, when I was going to be a freshman, wherever I was going to go to college, was rooming with Kenny Washington, who was the women's coach at UCLA and was David's roommate, and who had been on Coach Wooden's first championship teams in 64 and 65. Mm-hmm. And they came home one weekend and basically said, how'd you like to go to UCLA and play basketball? So that was my scholarship. That's how I was recruited. Yeah. And certainly an opportunity. And that was in 1975, 74, 75. And 1972, Title IX had been passed. So that's how I got my scholarship. I was a freshman at UCLA when my brother David was a senior. So I went through, and then 76 was the Olympics. And so in 1978, my senior year, we won the championship at UCLA. And David, his senior year, my freshman year in 75, that was Coach Wooden's last championship with David as a senior. And he was a number 2 pick in the draft, number 1 for the Lakers, and was in that trade that brought Kareem from Milwaukee. And David played in Milwaukee, which was ironic, where our parents are from.
Right.
And so all these things were happening. But I had not graduated because I'd been playing USA basketball every summer. So I wanted to get my degree at UCLA, and I had 2 more quarters to go. Plus, I was the number 1 draft pick in the WBL. And I thought, what a great honor. But I also wanted to stay amateur for the 1980 Olympics. And so I wanted to be an Olympian again. And so those were my two goals, was to graduate, which I did from UCLA, and then to go to the AD Olympics. In 79, I was the captain of the team. We won the world championships. We went to the Pan Am Games. We were the Jones Cup, and we had gone to the Spartacade Games. And things really weren't working out how I had kind of hoped. I was 24 years old and excited about being on the Olympics and playing for Sue Gunner, who was our assistant coach in 1976. Mm-hmm. And so when we got back from Russia, I got a call from Sam Nassi of the Indiana Pacers. And so when he asked me to try out as a free agent, I was not drafted, which a lot of people think that I was. I really did a lot of soul searching because I wanted to be an Olympian again. Yeah. But I thought, what an opportunity. And so when I made that decision, our president, Jimmy Carter, I think about a week later or 2 weeks later, boycotted the Olympics, which was heartbreaking for me because I knew all those athletes, whether it was the women's basketball team and everybody else representing our delegation, were not going to be able to compete in those Olympics, which was really sad. But I went on, and that's really kind of how that happened. And so I trained with my brother Jeff and talked to family members and so forth, and just looked for that support system again and tried to be in the best shape that I could.
A lot of people probably looked at that as a gimmick, the Pacers trying to make news, in a small market, things like that. But I remember thinking about it, and I didn't know you at the time, but I knew of you, and I knew of your brother and the success you had, and I thought this gal, has a chance. How close did you get to making the team? How many cuts did you survive?
Well, I don't know how close. I know too that in the beginning, you're absolutely right that being at UCLA gave myself and women's basketball a great platform. Right. And for Coach Wooden to make his comment, absolutely. I go to UCLA where Dave Myers and John Wooden and UCLA put women's basketball on the map because of that human interest story of a brother, sister playing at the same school and both being All-American and so forth. So it gave women's basketball a lot of recognition. It gave me a lot of recognition. The media in Los Angeles, they seemed to like me because they liked my brother David. And they liked Coach Wooden. Yeah. But in saying that too, that my senior year when we won the championship, we received a lot of positive exposure. And then all of a sudden now I'm trying out in the NBA. I'd never been to a press conference. I didn't know what a press conference was. Wow. And even before the press conference, Bob Leonard, Slick Leonard, was the coach. And, the Pacers were going through their change, too. They've been in the ABA, and now they were going to the NBA, and now they've got this new owner. And what is he doing, bringing this girl to our team? And certainly publicity was involved. But I never looked at it that way, David. I was focused on an opportunity as a basketball player. And mentally, physically, emotionally, it was the best I was ever prepared to play the game. And I'd been playing against men my whole life. Yeah. So what I was doing was nothing different. It was just very difficult for everybody else to accept. And especially when that first press conference came, they were not kind. They were not nice. They were challenging. And I was like really thrown back because, again, I didn't understand marketing and publicity and what a press conference was and what you were supposed to say. And I was still pretty shy at that time, too, still. But in saying that, I wasn't going to let what happened in high school dictate now an opportunity that somebody was giving me. And it was the best choice I ever made in my life.
And obviously the WBL and now the WNBA has given women an opportunity. Do you think there will ever be another female to sign an NBA contract, and why or why not?
I think there's always a possibility. Certainly, even though the WBL being the number one draft pick by the Houston Angels, and again, my decision in not going into the WBL because I wanted to stay amateur for the Olympics, and the offer to try out in the NBA had not happened yet. Right. So that was a hard decision too, but I wanted to stay amateur. Today, that's a lot different. You can be a professional in the Olympics today. But so in that decision, no question that the WBL was the precursor of where the WNBA is today. And the WBL and the other leagues in between in the ABL, and then David Stern and stepping up and Val Ackerman, seeing the potential for the opportunity for women to play basketball in this country is huge. And what a great opportunity for these young women. I'm so proud and happy for them. But, going into the Pacer tryout, I was received by media again on the WBL side saying, well, she's not that good. The game has passed her by. We've got 10 players better than her. And again, I was hurt, not understanding this was an opportunity for them to receive recognition on their league.
Yeah.
And once I did not make the team, it was a 3-day tryout. Well, not a 3-day tryout, but it was a rookie free agent camp, completely different than it is today.
Yeah.
And you also had, in the draft, you had like 17 or 18 rounds
in
the draft at that time. But as I said, I was not drafted. So I go into Indianapolis, and I know that it's at least a 3-day, 2-a-day practices for the first session, and then it would go on to the next session. And I did believe that I would make the team. Why would I be out there if I didn't think that and believe it? And I did not read the papers. I did not listen to the TV or the radio. I was constantly calling home and having positive feedback, but didn't want to surround myself around negative thinking. And it was hard in the sense because of how they treated it and the exposure. A lot of people there from the media. And then even today, it's hard to find any film or pictures of it. And yet today, everything is documented through social media. And so it's a big difference that way.
Yeah,
but it was an opportunity that even though as much as I was hurt not making the team, I was still with the team as a personal service contract. So it opened the door for broadcasting and public relations and speaking to people. But at 24, I still wanted to play.
Yeah.
And I was only with the Pacers for about 2.5 months and left them to go into the WBL. And the Houston Angels had traded my rights to the New Jersey Gems.
Okay. And I think it probably had, that publicity may have had something to do with the fact you competed. Were you the first female to compete in the Superstars?
Well, they had the Superstars was an event made for TV, obviously, and they had the men's Superstars, they had the women's Superstars. And I know that they had women's Superstars before I had even competed.
Okay.
I had been invited to compete while I was with Indiana. And so when that time came, I think it was sometime in December that the women's Superstars were going to happen. But by that time, I'd left the Pacers and had gone on to the WBL. And now I was playing for the New Jersey Gems. So there was a weekend. We might have had one game that I was supposed to get back to. And so I had a window to be able to go and compete in the Superstars down in the Bahamas. And again, playing 7 sports, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I'm pretty good. But I didn't realize that I'd been playing basketball and indoors, and I was probably as white as a ghost. And so being in the Bahamas sun competing in 7 sports out of 10 was very difficult. And I ended up coming 4th, and I was not very happy about it. But it changed my life forever because that's where I met Don. He and Bob Uecker were announcing for ABC. And my mom was from Milwaukee, and she came down, so she knew who Bob Uecker was. I knew who Bob Uecker was because of the commercials.
Yeah.
But even in growing up in Southern California, David, I really didn't know who Don Drysdale was because my brothers were all Giants fans in baseball.
Oh, boy.
And, but we didn't watch TV. Baseball really wasn't on TV. And yeah, you heard about the Dodgers, but none of us could afford to go to a Dodger game. But we were all outside playing before we watched baseball on TV.
I was going to ask you how you met. I was thinking that it was something with the Superstars. So he was a broadcaster. How did that go? Was it love at first sight?
I didn't know who he was. So I have no idea. But there was whatever connection I had. My brother Mark and his wife had come over. They had been down in Florida, and so they came over to the Bahamas and to be with my mom and myself. And again, I hadn't seen a lot of family because I'd been on the East Coast playing in the WBL in my tryout with the Pacers. And so I was just in heaven having family around. But the story goes a little bit that I think Don noticed me more because my sister-in-law basically said, recognizing the interaction, I guess, saying that's the guy that's going to take care of Annie. And lo and behold, who would have thought?
That's cool. So just talk about how that relationship built. Obviously, the Superstars was a short time thing, but you stayed in connection with him, and how did that relationship go?
Well, I did. As a matter of fact, when I was down in the Bahamas, he asked me to dinner one night, and he goes, "What would you do if I asked you to marry me?" And I'm like, going, "Who is this guy? I don't even know who this guy is." And so I, obviously, and Don talked about it before he passed away, that, he knew, and it was very difficult for me because he'd been married, and my folks had gone through a divorce. And so I was very much about understanding what divorce was, and felt very uncomfortable. But I had a job to do too. I was playing basketball, and I'd be back east, and but we had long conversations. It felt nice to not have a guy that was intimidated by me, I guess. And he knew who I was, even though I didn't know who he was. But we just talked about life. We talked about sports, and it was just great to have these conversations. And but he'd continue to ask me to marry him. I was like going, but he was a great support in the sense of continuing my broadcasting career. I took some classes at UCLA, and Professor Art Friedman really gave me an avenue to really think about. And so even though I got into broadcasting, Don convinced me to go to broadcasting school to help, kind of refine my skills, and which helped a lot. And remember, when I tried out for the Pacers in '79, that was the first year of ESPN.
Yeah.
And so ESPN was just a growing company too, and they didn't have a whole lot of women. And so I was able to kind of hook on in the early days and broadcast for softball, volleyball, and basketball. But my first real job, I think, in broadcasting was with KGMB in Hawaii, in Honolulu, and I did the University of Men's Basketball of the University of Hawaii, which wasn't a bad gig. But because of playing that first year in the WBL, which was the second year of the league, I was co-MVP, but they hadn't paid me my money. And so I was able to focus on the Superstars. And so even though I was broadcasting over in Hawaii, I was kind of back and forth to Hawaii and California, I was able to train. And so I was invited back to the Superstars and won it 3 years in a row. And in the interim was invited to compete in the men's Superstars. And so I was the only woman to compete in the men's Superstars. And,
okay. That's what I was thinking about.
Right.
That you
so the basketball, the WBL, so that second year I didn't play. I played my first year, which was the league's second year. And then I sat out the third year to train. And then that third year, the league folded. And so, and that was tough. It was tough to see the league fold. Yeah. But it opened up, again, another avenue for me to explore a career in broadcasting.
How long between when you and Don first met until you got married, until you finally gave in?
We got married in 1986. And our son, Don Jr., Don was working for the Chicago White Sox at the time, broadcasting for them. And when I met Don, he was working for ABC and the California Angels with Dick Enberg. Mm-hmm. And but certainly his job with the White Sox with Jerry Reinsdorf and Eddie Einhorn, that's where I really got to hone some of my broadcasting skills too in Chicago, and which was ironic because I lived there when I was a youngster for a few years. But our oldest son, Don Jr., was born on Don's birthday. So it was hard not to name him Don Jr. After his dad. And so after that, though, after 87, he got the job with the Dodgers. And so we left Chicago for Los Angeles. And in 88, he was on the radio calling the World Series when Kirk Gibson hit that home run too. So, that was a special time. And then in 89, our son Darren was born. And in 93, our daughter Drew was born.
I've shared this story with you, and I've shared it with a lot of people. When I met you, I did a book on Poly Pavilion. So it was mostly on the men's basketball program, but we also included women's basketball and volleyball. I got to know Karch Karai, and I even interviewed Mary Lou Retton because the 84 Olympics were in Poly Pavilion. But that's when I met you. And I remember getting it set up, and you were pregnant with Darren, and you said, come to the house. And I'm thinking, this is really cool. I'm going to meet Don Drysdale. I wanted to meet you too, of course, Annie, but I'm going to meet Don Drysdale. My father-in-law grew up in Topeka, Kansas, when the only team in Major League Baseball west of the Mississippi was in St. Louis, which is that far west of the Mississippi. And a lot of his friends were Cardinals fans, and he didn't want to be a Cardinals fan. So he was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, and his favorite player was Don Drysdale. So I was really excited about that. And I got to your house, found out that the Dodgers were on the road. So I met you and your son, Don Jr. And when I got back to Kansas City, I went over to my father-in-law's house and I said, he wanted to know all about the research I had done on the UCLA book. And I said, oh, guess who I met? And he said, who? I said, I met Don Drysdale. And he's just, oh my goodness. He was really, really amazed and pleased. And I said, but he's not as big as I thought he'd be. And he was trying to be respectful. I said, yeah, he's actually a little guy. And I dragged this on for probably 30 or 40 seconds. And he didn't know what to say because he knew how big Don was. And finally I said, oh, I'm talking about Don Jr. He's only about a little guy. So I had him pretty good. And I've known my father-in-law since I was in first grade. So he should have known better than to believe my story. Anyway, when I came back that fall with the book, I remember seeing you at the first basketball practice. And I came up to you and we said hi to each other. And I said, I'm here to deliver the books. And you said, oh, great. I can't wait to see it. And I said, well, I want to deliver to the house. And you said, well, I'm right here. Just bring it in. Well, I want to deliver to the house. And we went back and forth for a couple of minutes. And finally you said, oh yeah, Don's home. So we set it up for that next Saturday morning. And I remember walking up, and you guys lived really close to the Rose Bowl at the top of a cul-de-sac, and the house sat on a hill, and you had to walk up several steps. And he met me at the door, just this towering figure, very intimidating. And I mean, nice enough guy, but he invites me in. And I don't know if he had heard the story before, but I told him what I did to my father-in-law, and you and I laughed about it, and he didn't. He thought it was mean. And he said, well, that's really not a nice thing to do. But I said, what's your father-in-law's name? And I said, Lynn, and I spelled it for him. And he walked around the corner and got a postcard of his Hall of Fame plaque. And he signed it to my father-in-law. Well, I saw him last week. I took my mother-in-law to get a COVID shot. My father-in-law is 86 years old. And I told him I was going to speak with you today. And he said, oh, I still have that postcard. It's taped to the mirror in the bedroom.
So he sees it every day.
He sees it every day. He's still very pleased with it. But the funny part about that, I skipped this part. When I came back from that visit, I said, guess who I met? He goes, Don Drysdale. I said, yeah, I did. He said, is he still a little guy? I said, well, Don Jr.'s grown a little bit in a few months, but Don Sr. is a big guy, and he has this for you. And that's when I handed him the card, and he was speechless. So wow,
that's a great story. That is, but Donnie was like that. Donnie was very considerate of others, and he was such a giving person.
Yeah, for sure. And I wish I had gotten to know him better, but I've cherished our friendship through the years.
When they retired Lou Alcindor, Bill Walton, mine, and Denise Curry, they honored us and retired our numbers, and Billy Moore and John Wooden were there. Don came, and I had already had Darren. And it was the first time Don had ever been to Pauley Pavilion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, back in 1989. And
Okay.
So that was a special thing, because the fact that, here he was in Los Angeles and he played for the Dodgers for so many years and had never been to UCLA. So that was a special moment for me.
I've got to ask you, and I know we talked about this the first time I met you, with your athletic ability and Don's athletic ability, did your kids inherit a lot of athletic ability from you guys?
Well, sports was a part of their lives, absolutely. DJ, he was a natural. I mean, by the time he was 2, you could throw a dirt clog or a rock, and he'd take a stick and he could hit it.
Yeah.
So his instincts for baseball were so natural, and he loved basketball too. He was a very intense, terrific basketball player. But he played high school, and Darren could do anything. I mean, he played a little basketball, but soccer is a sport he gravitated to. He played a little football. And my daughter Drew also did soccer and ran track. Darren did track also. So, they all played through high school. And Darren played at the junior college. He played soccer and football for a year.
Okay.
And but then they just went on, and DJ went to ASU, and he's married now and has a wonderful wife. And Darren's engaged. Drew, who sings now, she's sang the national anthem quite a few times at Dodger Stadium and has put out an album.
Cool.
So, they've all taken their different journeys, and but certainly sports was a part of their lives.
Yeah, it couldn't help but be part of their lives. Did they feel pressure being, the kids of Ann Meyers-Drysdale and Don Drysdale? I would imagine that would be difficult to handle the expectations that came with that.
When they were younger, it was amazing the pressure put upon other people. Not pressure, but I should say expectations.
Yeah.
Which they didn't understand. Yeah. And as they got older, I think there were things said to them that they would never reveal to me, even to this day.
Yeah.
So I think that they just learned to deal with it, and maybe there was a point they just said it's not worth it. I know that Darren a lot of times would not say what his last name was and who he was, and Drew became that way too. Uh-huh. People constantly saying, "Are you going to play basketball like your mom? You're going to play basketball like your mom." So it was just this sense of I'm doing what I do.
Yeah.
And they certainly did. But I know when they were younger, there were a lot of expectations put upon them. As a matter of fact, DJ, when he was playing Little League, he was playing with Matt McGuire, Mark McGuire's son at the time when Mark was going through that home run thing.
Yeah.
And the media just really took off on it. And Matt, he was not a big time baseball player, but again, the expectations by others puts a lot of pressure on these kids. And certainly I think having two parents that were in the limelight and had been successful, it was a little bit more difficult for them. And maybe things might have been different if Don had been alive and around to maybe deal with that a little bit better. But, we know plenty of children that have gone on that have had famous parents, whether it's in acting or sports or music or anything else, and have been able to achieve. Yeah,
for sure. I'm sure, especially when they were younger, you were just mom and dad. You weren't a Hall of Fame basketball player, Hall of Fame baseball player. You were just mom and dad.
Well, I never looked at it that way. Yeah, you're a mom and you're trying to raise your children.
I remember hearing a story when Johnny Unitas, Hall of Fame quarterback for the Colts, his family got a new contract or whatever, and he moved his family to a newer neighborhood, to a nicer neighborhood, and the neighborhood kids. And his kids were probably like 6, 8 years old, something like that. And the neighborhood kids all found out that Johnny Unitas had moved into the neighborhood. So they would come to knock on the door and ask, can your dad come and sign an autograph? And they thought this must be a neighborhood thing. So eventually they went and knocked on all the neighborhood doors and asked the dads for autographs. So it's a matter of the kid's perspective. You're just mom and dad. And
it's the parents that teach them what is going on.
Yeah, for sure. So talk about your book, because I was doing a little bit of research just to catch up on some of the things that you've done. I love the title of it. So you got, you let some girl beat you.
Right.
Talk about how that book came about and what the message is behind that book.
Well, it was very difficult for me. I was not interested in writing a book. A lot of people, when I had my tryout with the Pacers, well, you're going to write a book now. Let's do your story. National Enquirer had just come out too, so they wanted to do something. I didn't do the tryout to write my story or to write a book. That's not who I was. And I was pretty shy and intimidated by this whole thing anyways. I just wanted to play ball. And so, just doors opened up for me, opportunities down the road. I had a lot of people that would come up through the years. And even when I was with the Phoenix Mercury as their general manager, a lot of the fans came up to me and asked me to write a book. And so I did it begrudgingly. I really did. But I looked back when I was in 4th grade and read that book on Babe Dickinson's The Harriets. And I thought that book really impacted me. Yeah. And so if I could write a book that would impact somebody else, maybe then okay, I'm open to it. And Joni Ravenna, we had a great relationship and we had a lot of hours. And I think it took over 2 years to get this done with all the interviews and so forth. And I'm glad I have something out there, certainly to tell people my story. But I know that because there's such a great platform with the WNBA now and soccer leagues and so many other women's sports going on, that there's so many other women that have stories that need to be told.
Yeah. So it is the message of it that gender doesn't define you. I need to get a copy of it, obviously. Is it don't let anybody hold you back? What's your message in that book?
Well, the message is just, you got to keep trying. I've always said, when somebody gives you an opportunity, take it. You've got to try. If you don't try, you'll never know. Don't look back in your life and say, what if?
Yeah.
If I had said no to the Pacer tryout, what would have happened?
Yeah.
Where would I be today? Certainly the Olympics went away. And yes, I would have gone into the WBL, but would I have met Don? Would I have been able to have the opportunities in broadcasting?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I've been broadcasting for over 40 years and did those Olympics in 1984 for ABC, which were, right there in Los Angeles. And then to go on with NBC to call 5 Olympics for them from 2000 to 2016, to work for ESPN, to call CBS men's NCAA tournament games. Just so many great opportunities with broadcasting to a game that I love and has opened so many doors and given me so many opportunities to do things in life and to travel and to meet people because of this game. How lucky am I? And so you let some girl beat you, I think goes back to even on my tryouts with the Pacers, even before that though, is whether I'm out on the court, people would say a guy blocks my shot. It's no big deal. It's only a girl. If they did block my shot, you let some girl beat you if I made that shot. And so even today, we still deal with that, not just on a sports level, but on a professional level in corporate America, just even on when you're kids, and again, a lot of it comes from parents, but the terms that are used against women, you let a girl beat you, it's like girls aren't good enough. The female persuasion is like, how dare you be compared to a female? And some of the negative things you throw like a girl, but in essence, in the corporate world, if you're going for a job and somebody says, you let a woman beat you, I mean, you should all be on the same level, but it's not that way still. And but certainly I think that with the WNBA, with the platform that they had during the bubble this past year, because of COVID, both the NBA and the WNBA, but the women are the ones that really step up. They really do, whether it's systemic racism and social issues, political issues, equal pay, looking for equal pay, not just on sports, but so much in the corporate America. And certainly I think for them to be able to speak out on so many different issues, these young women, they've got a lot of confidence and strength about what is going on in the world. And so that's a big plus. So the title of the book is You Let Some Girl Beat You, is about, you got to try. And when you get knocked down, you got to get back up. And
I would think even back to middle school and elementary school, when you were told you couldn't play with the boys, it goes that far back, doesn't it?
Don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can.
That's awesome. I always like to let people give them two opportunities. One, you've already taken advantage of, telling what about your family, what your kids are doing these days. The other one is, what's your legacy? And I imagine you could approach it from many different angles. First woman to do this, first person to do this, all these things, but also the fact of you inspiring a generations plural of young women to achieve what they want to achieve. So with all that, what would you say your legacy is?
David, I don't have an answer for that. I really don't. I just live each day, as Papa used to say, live each day as your masterpiece. And whatever happens, just because you're not in the public eye doesn't mean that you're not living life. And certainly, as Don used to say, you're only as good as yesterday's paper. So there's always somebody new coming along. And, that's why you have to be the best that you can be, not comparing yourself to somebody else. And I try and live a good life and be kind to others and give back to others, because so many have given to me to be where I am today, because I didn't do it on my own.
Yeah.
But, certainly I can have a lot of that inside me in what was formed when I was younger and being in the family that I was. But I know that I've gotten through a lot of things through faith and family. Certainly losing Don, I needed to have a lot of faith. And certainly my family helped me raise my children. But that legacy, people are going to forget. You just do the best that you can, and that's all you can ask for.
Yeah. I've been asked that question as a sports writer, and one of my answers is I've gotten to know some wonderful people that other people know about because they're really good at sports, but I've gotten to know some wonderful people, and you, my friend, are at the top of that list. So I appreciate you joining me today, and again, happy birthday.
Thank you so much. I hope I keep having more.
There you go.
Thanks for listening to Sports Connections with David Smale. Make sure to subscribe, follow, and rate the show from your favorite podcast platform. You can learn more about David Smale and his work by visiting davidsmalebooks.com. Don't forget to join us weekly for new episodes. Until next time.